Hi, I'm International Master Danny Wrench, Chief Chess Officer at chess.com. Chess is an ancient board game. It dates back as far as 600 AD and is played on a 64-square board rotating between 32 dark and 32 light squares. You're going to learn how each piece moves, that the goal of the game is to checkmate the enemy king, how to set up a chessboard, and more. Let's jump in. When I teach chess, I like to start with the easiest pieces to understand first, moving our way toward the more complicated movements. Let's start with the rook. Each player has two rooks, and they start in the corners of the board. A rook is often called a castle by beginner chess players, but the true and proper name is a rook. Rooks are the second most powerful pieces on the board, and their movement is extremely simple to understand. They can go up and down or side to side in any one direction as far as they desire. The next easiest piece to understand is the bishop. Each player also begins with two bishops, just like the rooks. But unlike the rooks, we forever will have a light square and a dark square bishop. Bishops are stuck to their respective starting diagonal for the rest of the game. They can move along these diagonals as far as they want in any one direction, one move at a time. However, they are never allowed to cross over to the other diagonal. Chess players often refer to the board as having a dark squared bishop or a light squared bishop. The next piece to learn is the queen. Her Majesty is by far the most powerful piece on the chessboard. She combines the powers of a rook and a bishop together. That means from a square like this, she might at one point move like a rook as far as she wants on the straight lines of the board, or, in this case, like a light square bishop, reaching as far as she wants to the furthest corners and diagonals of the chessboard. She can move as far as her heart desires as long as she doesn't run into another piece and maintains the movements of a rook or a bishop. Now it's time to learn about the knight. Because of its equine appearance, a knight is often referred to as a horse by beginner chess players. But as a true chess player after watching this video, you will now refer to this noble steed by its proper name, the knight. A knight moves like a capital L in any one direction, 2 squares forward and 1 square to the side. Depending on the direction that it starts to, it stays moving 2 squares within that direction before completing the movement, as we can see, like a capital L to find its final square. A knight is also the only piece that can hop over another piece on the way to its final destination. In this example, we have a black pawn taking away the knight's route to the square b6 or b4. However, the knight is not actually prevented from going to this square. It hops right over the enemy piece. Often beginner players assume that because they hopped through this piece to their final square, that they can take this piece off the board. That is not the case. The knight is seen as bypassing any pieces on its route to its final square. You would, however, capture an enemy piece if that piece were on the final square you're moving to. Now it's time for us to talk about the little guys. The pawns may seem like the lowliest and shortest of your pieces, but they are actually the ones with the most potential and also the most numerous. Each player starts out with 8 pawns, respectively along the 2nd rank for white, 8 pawns, respectively, along the 7th rank for black. A pawn can only move forward 1 square at a time, and never can a pawn move backward. However, what we'll learn about the pawn is that there are more exceptions to the movements of how to play with a pawn than all of the other pieces combined. For starters, on the first move only, pawns have the option to move 2 squares forward instead of just 1. Now, this is not an obligation. If one player chooses to move a pawn forward 2 squares, that does not mean the other player has to. You can choose at any time to move forward 1 or 2 squares. But again, a pawn only has the option to go 2 squares on its first move. From then on out, a pawn is stuck moving 1 square at a time.